This video is sponsored by Photos. Photos, because weather planning was yesterday. And yeah, that's a fact. People don't like to plan because it doesn't work for them. They plan a killer shot at home, but when they go to a photo spot, the light doesn't come, or it comes completely different. So they go home with empty hands in that. And ultimately, they stop planning because they think planning wouldn't work for them. But the thing is, planning works, of course. It makes even a huge difference in the outcome. Most of my portfolio shots were planned, and it works almost every time. Now, if it doesn't work for you, but it works for me, then the question becomes, what in the world am I doing differently to you, right? So in this video, I'm going to tell you why planning fails for so many photographers and how we can solve that issue in quite a simple way, and that forever. My friends, very nice to see you. That's quite interesting. I talked to so many photographers over the past time, photographers who don't like to plan. And whenever I asked them why they do not like to plan, they all answered more or less the same. Look, Christian, I try to plan, but whenever I do that, it's like winning the lottery if the light really comes in the end as I have planned that. And that is something I can't agree with, I have to say. I mean, it's never a 100% thing, the light, but it is at least possible to plan it in a way so that it almost always comes like predicted, almost always. Now, why do you not get your planned light? What are you doing wrong? First of all, we should accept that light is a product in landscape photography. Light is a product of the weather. Whenever we try to get a specific light situation, we actually try to get a specific weather situation, right? The weather is the precursor for good light. So how do we get right weather? That's the question we should ask ourselves. And the most common way would be to use any weather service or any weather app, right? And either we believe them or not. And I don't believe them, I have to say, and there are even some good reasons therefore, because they are not made for photographers. Also, when some of them look like that, but they are not made for photographers. They are made for everyone, but not for photographers. Just to give you a short overview of how weather forecasts are made, how they work, how they are predicted, how they do their forecasts. Well, first of all, the weather data gets collected from different weather stations. And based on those data, the possible weather for the future is calculated, right? The problem is just, to consider all those data, it would need an extreme fast supercomputer. And anyone would need to pay for that. And that would cost a lot of money, right? But weather services should cost as little as possible to make it available for free to everyone, right? So how can that be solved? And that's even quite easy, I have to say. They simply collect all the data from all the weather stations, though they do not calculate the weather based on them, at least not directly. What they do is they transform those data by interpolation and extrapolation. We get a constant grid of 80 to 80 kilometers, for instance. Sounds difficult, but it's quite easy actually. It is something like, you would reduce a big image to a lower resolution to get less megapixels. It's the same principle actually. They bring the resolution of their data down. So they get a grid with a lower resolution than the input, and then they calculate based on those data from the grid instead of the real data of the weather station. They calculate with a resized image, with a small image, like something like that. All they have to do afterwards is they have to interpolate the outcome again into a smaller grid of 2 to 2 kilometers, for instance, so that it is possible to get a weather forecast for each single village. So it is like resizing a big image to quite a small one, then to process this small one, and afterwards to make it bigger again. And that works because interpolation, extrapolation doesn't take as much CPU power as the weather calculation itself, of course. So they save a lot of CPU power, time, and most importantly money, because it's a difference if you need a supercomputer for the weather calculation or just a cheap one from the store on the corner or so, right? I mean, it's logical. If there's used such a big grid of dozens of kilometers, there are many elements overlooked by the weather server in their calculation. That will lead to a completely different weather output. For someone, yeah, who just wants to go for swimming or so, yeah, it's just a little bit annoying if it is anyway raining, although the forecast said sunny. But as a landscape photographer, it is the difference if he returns home with a killer shot in his bag or with empty hands. And a photographer wants to know even much more than if it's just sunny or rainy or cloudy or something like that. However, there are also situations when there is point weather necessary. Just think about pilots of airplanes, for instance. They need to make sure that the weather is really safe to fly. Or think about big outdoor events, which would cost a lot of money if they would cancel it because of a thunderstorm, which would not arrive in there. Or think about big construction projects or so, which should start as early as possible in the year, for instance. Yeah, time is money. But they don't want to risk that the soil is still frozen after the winter before they start to dig. There are often millions in the game. And for a situation like that, there exist also weather services which are really accurate. They calculate the weather in the same way actually, just with one difference. Instead of a big grid of dozens of kilometers, they use quite fine grids of 4 to 4 kilometers or even 2 to 2 kilometers. You need an army of servers to calculate the weather in that way, but the output is accurate. Really accurate. There are weather providers out there where you can purchase point weather for a specific place in a specific time. Just think, yeah, when the big supervisor of a big construction project wants to know if it's possible to dig tomorrow, they invest money for getting that information. And they get a really accurate weather prediction by that. I don't say forecast here, I say prediction, because there is so much of data considered that it is really very likely that it will come true in there. You see, it is not a good idea to use a weather model with a too big grid, or in other words, with a too low resolution, right? In my experience, a resolution of 4 to 4 kilometers or smaller is ideal for landscape photography. But all the weather forecasts you get just for a little money or even for free usually tends to use quite big grids. And 80 to 80 kilometers is not seldom here, by the way. And that is simply not accurate, as it averages all the weather in a sector of 80 to 80 kilometers. It overlooks too much. It is not only that there will come a bank of clouds in the end that was overlooked. That also happens, of course, but that is not the biggest problem. It is more that the weather can change even completely by that. That's the chaos theory. You know, if there's a little anomaly here, the weather can change massively there. And the next problem is, even if you would pay money to a weather service who offers point weather, you will not be happy as a landscape photographer, because we usually don't tend to photograph just a point in a landscape, right? I mean, unless we do macro photography or so, of course. In vista photography, we usually photograph quite far distances of hundreds of kilometers. In woodland photography, the distances are smaller, though also here we are dependent on the light coming through from the horizon, which could also be hundreds of kilometers away, or even further. So we are not only interested in point weather in landscape photography, we are also interested in how the weather is hundreds of kilometers around. Maybe we want to know if there will come light through in the early morning from the horizon, which is quite far away, and that although there are clouds. Yeah, we usually want to get clouds in landscape photography, right? But we also want to get light, so we need a light channel from the horizon going through the clouds. The only way to get accurate weather for landscape photography is, there are even two, by the way, the easy one and the more difficult one. And I would say let's even start with the difficult one, because it simply explains the principle. Okay, again, we want to get accurate point weather, but not only for one point, but for a big area around this point, right? There are many points in a section of hundreds of kilometers around our photo location. What we need is weather maps, not apps, maps. Pilots use weather maps to make their own predictions, for instance, and landscape photographers can too. There are different maps for humidity, for cloud coverage on different layers, precipitation, air pressure, and 20, 30, 40, hundreds of weather maps. But I want to be honest here with you. I engaged quite detailed about weather maps, and that for many years. And it took me around 2 years to bring it to a level where I was able to make my own weather predictions, and that in a super accurate way. I think in 19 out of 20 times my predictions were always right, and I was able to take my planned photo in the end. Another big advantage is that you don't only get basic weather by that, you can predict weather phenomena, which we like to have in landscape photography. Just think about red sky, alpenglow, the belt of volcanoes, sunrises or sunsets with clouds, fog, mist, and all that in a really accurate way, and many more weather phenomena that are interesting for landscape photography. Yeah, you can predict photography weather by that. That's crazy. And the only downside is that it takes quite long to get in. And even if you got in, it is really time consuming, as you always have to observe the weather maps, and that multiple times a day. Yeah, I mean, all few hours there appear new weather maps, and you have to observe how your predictions change with each run. And so I always put much more time into my weather prediction than into my photography. Yeah, it's an own hobby actually. But I said there's also an easy way, right? Yeah, I mean, you could simply use a weather assistant for landscape photographers. Just imagine there would be someone who would observe the weather maps for you, and every day he sends an email to you when he found a spectacular weather phenomena at one of your dream locations. Photos is such a weather assistant. Yeah, it's designed for landscape photographers. You simply create your photo locations and tell Photos which weather phenomena you would like to get on each of your locations. And as soon as there's a match, Photos it will inform you by that with an email. And Photos works with the best possible grid in each location, and that worldwide. And that means 2 to 2 kilometers, and even in some locations where it's offered even 1 to 1 kilometers. That's crazy. There is no more accurate way to calculate the weather. It doesn't only consider the weather at one single point, it also looks around. Because on the one hand, we need light channels coming from the horizon maybe, and on the other hand, predictions often come a little bit shifted, you know, a little bit more to the west or to the east or something like that. So this could change the weather on your photo spot completely. And Photos takes that all into account. I will put you a link down in the description where you can check out Photos yourself. Right now, there's even a 20% off special, by the way. Give it a try, it will change your photography forever. It changed mine massively. Oh, by the way, meanwhile, it is even more accurate for me than using weather maps. And yeah, that's simply because a human would never be able to consider that many details as a machine can do. In case you anyway prefer to use weather maps instead, I will put you also a link to my preferred weather maps down in the description. They're completely free of charge, by the way. And yeah, I mean, being right with the weather is a huge difference for planning, right? But there are definitely more things to consider than just the weather when it comes down to planning. And I made already a comprehensive video about that. I will link it here for you. And friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. If yes, please give me a thumbs up. And thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.